What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row. And of course, it is Andy Backstrom. It is Tim May, the 40-year vet. And it is Spencer Holbrook for another offseason report presented by Buyers Auto. You know the crew by now. We're going to be here all year talking about Ohio State football in the 8-month buildup to Ohio State, Indiana in Bloomington. We start with who will start. Tim, I'm going to start with you. We're going to talk a lot about quarterbacks today. Who is going to start for Ohio State against Indiana in early September? I'm asking right away. Tim, what do you think?
The number one quarterback is designated by the coaching staff and perhaps a fan poll. Number two, number one going into spring's got to be Kyle McCord. You got to figure Kyle McCord's waited so long for this possibility, this opportunity that he's going to take advantage of it. I would go the smart money, which you can say now in the state of Ohio. I think smart money would be on Kyle McCord at this moment.
Andy, what do you think?
I agree with Tim. I mean, I feel like it's Kyle McCord's job to lose right now. That being said, I want to see both of these players perform in spring, not only in spring practice, but in the spring game. I just think that Kyle's been here for so long. He's started a game in his true freshman season against Akron. A lot of his yards in that game were after the catch, so his stats are a little bit deceiving. But he's got a big arm. You know, he's good when he rolls out of the pocket. He's pretty accurate. I think he has all the tools. Now, Devin Brown might have the higher ceiling, at least when you watch the high school tape. But I think right now you're looking at an Ohio State offense that has all the weapons you could ever need and more. And so do you really need a guy that has the highest ceiling, or do you need the guy that's going to take care of the ball and is going to win you games? And I think right now, from what I've seen, Kyle McCord is that guy.
I completely agree. I think it's going to be Kyle McCord, and we're going to get into why Kyle McCord over Devin Brown in all three of our minds. This is a unanimous thing, I guess. Not a lot of building here to see, which one of us is going to be right, because we'll either all be right or we'll all be wrong. But, Kyle McCord has waited his turn behind CJ Stroud. Like you said, Andy, he started a game. Like you said, Tim, he's experienced. He knows what he's doing in this system. He's been with Ryan Day for 2 years. This is year 3, off-season 3 with him. I remember the first time we talked to him, and he blew us all away there in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. That's not taking anything away from Devin Brown at all. I just think that when it comes down to it, who's going to be more, not even reliable, not even more trustworthy, but I just think that Kyle McCord is going to have the upper hand, and it's going to be really hard for Devin Brown to overtake that, Tim. It's going to be a lot of fun, though, to watch this as we officially kick off this quarterback competition with winter workouts this week and with spring practice coming up in just 6 weeks, how this all unfolds, how Ryan Day handles it, and how the Buckeyes handle it as a program.
Yeah, and then on top of it, I mean, this offense is so thickly layered with things that they can get to if the quarterback has experience or at least knows the system. I think Devin Brown, you threw that haymaker at me at the beginning of who would I pick to be the number one quarterback going into and I'm just going on based on, what we've seen a little bit in the past. And number two, just from an experience standpoint, as Andy was pointing out. But then number three, just the depth of knowledge of the playbook or of the play iPad, whatever it is they keep the plays on. I think, obviously Kyle McCord's going to have a little bit of an edge there also. But, if it comes down to just pure playmaking, then Katie barred the door. We saw you don't ever really know what the coaches are thinking, right? And we saw, in my opinion, Joe Burrow probably have a better spring game in 2018 than Dwayne Haskins Jr. did. But it was the totality of it all. It was how long you've been around, so to speak, and what impressions did you make, and did you stay healthy at the most important times when some decisions were being made, which obviously was a bugaboo for Joe Burrow when he hurt his wrist. So bottom line is you go with Kyle McCord based on that. But I'm telling you, this quarterback room is in pretty damn good shape when you look at it and you consider the talent they've got on hand. And we'll get into Tristan Gebbia here probably in a minute. But, yeah, that's why I would go with Kyle McCord. But I really like the talent of Devin Brown also.
Yeah, I wasn't really planning on going toward Lincoln Keenholz and Tristan Gebbia here just because it seems to be shaping up as Kyle McCord versus Devin Brown. I don't think that that's groundbreaking news for anybody, Andy. Obviously, Lincoln Keenholz, Tristan Gebbia will both show up eventually. Tristan was supposed to be here in the spring, and then Lincoln is supposed to be here in the summer. But this is a Kyle McCord, as of now, versus Devin Brown race. Injuries can change that. But these are two former five-star players. These are two high-level guys that Ryan Day picked as his quarterback in their respective classes. Kyle McCord was one of Ryan Day's first choices, maybe the top choice in that 2021 class, choosing him almost over J.J. McCarthy as the high school prospect he wanted. Meanwhile, Devin Brown, a little bit of a late bloomer, former USC commit, who chose the Ohio State over USC in the end and chose to play for Ryan Day. These two guys, really well respected. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Devin Brown was the number one overall player in the country for his class, according to the folks that we work for at On3. So this is a heavyweight battle, as Tim likes to say. These are two heavyweights that are going to throw their punches. It is going to be a very exciting spring for Ohio State. I know the season just ended 3 weeks ago. CJ Stroud just declared for the NFL draft 1 week ago. But this is massive for the program in a pivotal year to figure out and make sure that it has its guy at quarterback from day one.
I anticipate that the fan favorite is going to be Devin Brown, because if you watch his high school tape, it is really, really fun to watch. I mean, this guy's elusive. He's a good runner. He had 8 rushing touchdowns his senior year of high school. You know, he's really good at making guys miss in space. While Kyle McCord has legs and he's certainly mobile, can roll outside the pocket, get that first down on a short yardage situation, maybe with the zone read, Devin Brown is a different level of running ability. People, as they called for CJ Stroud to run all throughout his career, and we're happy to see that in the Peach Bowl. People like to see that from Ohio State quarterbacks. I feel like the fans will want to see a Devin Brown just because of his athletic ability. Now, that being said, CJ Stroud had that athletic ability, and they weren't calling upon him to use it very often in his Ohio State career. So it's not to say that if Devin Brown got that opportunity, he would be actually using it. But the thing that's funny with watching Kyle McCord, if you look at his high school tape, is you get to also watch Marvin Harrison Jr., considering that they were high school teammates and state champions together at St. Joe's Prep in Philadelphia. And their dynamic is something that's electric to watch at the high school level. It's been cool to see at Ohio State, just the limited experience that Kyle McCord has had on the field in Columbus. And that's the interesting thing when you go back and you look at his time so far here at Ohio State and you watch Kyle McCord, you're seeing passes complete to Emeka Egbuka. He had an 85-yard pass. Now, a lot of that was after the catch with Emeka's work against Akron. But he's having passes completed to Emeka, Marvin, Joe Royer, all these guys that you're seeing a part of this offense. They're going to be huge pieces in 2023. Kyle McCord's already been there, and he's already done that. And that's why, as Spencer mentioned, he just has such a huge leg up in this competition.
Yeah, Jaden Ballard. There's another guy. But this is the interesting thing about this competition, though. And you guys may or may not agree with me, but I don't expect, unless it's a runaway by either one, I don't expect the coaching staff to declare who the winner is in this thing after the spring or even in the summer, because it's almost vital for both of these guys to be around in the fall. I think you agree with me, because this quarterback room has picked up some depth over the last 2 months. Obviously, first by getting Lincoln Keenholz, flipping him from Washington, and getting the transfer from what will be a 7-year collegian, Tristan Gebbia, to transfer into Ohio State from Oregon State. But the bottom line is they really need these two top guys. They're number one and number two, at least going into the spring, I do believe, to stick around. Don't you agree? Going into the preseason in the August.
Yeah, absolutely.
In August.
Absolutely, they need both of these guys to stick around, and that's why I don't expect this quarterback competition to be wrapped up until August. That's not even mentioning the fact that Ryan Day decided that he would charade us all by dragging out the competition between Justin Fields and Gunnar Hoke in 2019, when we all knew who was going to be the starter then. Ryan Day didn't want to name a starter until August. I think it was August 7th. Ryan Day didn't want to name CJ Stroud the starter, even though he was obviously the starter over Kyle McCord and Jack Miller in 2021, until I believe in the middle of August 15th or 17th. I might have my days wrong, but it was late in the process. Ryan Day loves taking his time in these quarterback competitions. He loves making sure he has his guy. He doesn't want to have to go back on his decision. He wants to be absolutely sure. And so, yeah, 15 practices is going to tell us a lot about who the leader in the clubhouse is after the first 15 practices. But at the same time, Ryan Day is going to want practice 16 and 17 and 18 and even 19, 20 and so on and so forth, because he wants to make sure that locker room knows who the number one guy is, and it's not going to change. There were calls for CJ Stroud to maybe take a back seat to Kyle McCord after that Akron start. And Ryan Day said, no, CJ's our guy no matter what, because he was sure that CJ was the guy. And guess what? Ryan Day was right. And
yeah, but what's interesting about that dynamic, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, Andy, but as Spencer was naming off the days, he ran out of fingers and toes. I don't know if you noticed, he stopped at 20. But I digress. What's interesting is, though, in putting it off, I think he put some doubt in some folks' minds way back when 2 years ago of whether CJ, how clearly was CJ the guy, and so there halftime of the Minnesota game when CJ's checking his cell phone and seeing everybody coming down on him after his first half of his first start, there was a lot of doubt out there. And some of that was to a certain extent seeded by the coaching staff, in my opinion. I don't think there was ever a real doubt who the number one was, just based on a lot of things. But this is an interesting dynamic you have to play, though, in this modern game, man, with the transfer portal sitting right there with the door opening and closing and closing and opening. That's so alluring for these guys. So I think it's going to be, once again, very interesting to watch how they play it.
Yeah, and if Kyle McCord wins the job, you could see Devin Brown sticking around because he'll be the unquestioned starter for next year if Kyle McCord has a good year. I could see Devin Brown doing that. If Devin Brown wins the job, it's very difficult to see how Kyle McCord would stick around past the spring. And so there's just another reason, like you said, Tim, why this quarterback competition will drag into August. It's why we're beginning it in January, because it's such a crucial moment for this program to figure out who the next guy's going to be. There weren't a lot of questions on who it was going to be in 2021. Justin Fields was leaving, and it was becoming more obvious with each day, even in the 2020 season, who was going to be next guy up. Well, it seems obvious right now that it would be Kyle McCord because he's already had 2 years in the program. But Devin Brown is so talented that you can't say that right now. They've got to figure out who their guy is, because this is, like I keep saying, a pivotal moment for the program. You've got 6 true road games next year. You go to Wisconsin, you go to Notre Dame, you go to Michigan. You've lost 2 straight to Michigan. You've got to have your guy, Andy. And so I think that this is such a pivotal moment for the program. And that's why, instead of waiting until the first week of March, we're sitting here on January 24th talking about the quarterback competition officially beginning as the Buckeyes truly kick off winter conditioning here in the next few weeks.
I think it already began. I think it began during the Peach Bowl prep. I think that competition was already underway. And what's interesting about this is let's play out the hypothetical where Devin Brown wins this competition and is the week 1 starter. And as we expect in that situation, let's say Kyle McCord transfers. Well, now you got a situation where who's quarterback number 2? If Devin Brown's the starter, is the backup going to be Tristan Gebbia, or is it going to be Lincoln Kienholz? That's something that's interesting too, because you're 1 play away. I mean, Devin Brown talked about this season being 2 plays away. Well, that was certainly true. You're 1 play away at the backup position. We saw Kyle McCord have to come in when CJ got hurt in his first year as a starter. Who's to say that wouldn't happen again? So you just need to be prepared for all these situations, and that depth is so important. And that's why it was kind of, a little bit overlooked when they brought in Tristan Gebbia as a 7th-year guy. He's more of a glorified graduate assistant at this point. But he could come into play more than we think, and you need to have that kind of depth to have someone at least be available. And if that situation did pan out that way where Devin Brown is the starter, you have to account for that.
Yeah, I can call up video right now of Tristan Gebbia playing complete games for Oregon State. I mean, this guy was pretty highly recruited coming out of Calabasas, California, Calabasas High School. And when he signed with Nebraska way back when, it might have been before some of our listeners were even born. But the bottom line is, he's had an injury situation, a competition situation, all these other things, but he has shown competence of being a Power 5 quality quarterback. Now, does he look like the next coming of Dan Marino or whomever you want to name? Not necessarily, but he has played some. He should have some poise about him. He should have a little bit of a presence about him. I mean, he was a 2-time captain at Oregon State. You understand what I'm saying? So this guy's got a little bit of he's got a lot of game going for him in a lot of respects. And that's what's interesting to me. Like you just pointed out, Spencer, this is a team that's going to return everybody who matters offensively except the starting quarterback and 3 members of the starting offensive line. I mean, on the one hand, boy, this team is loaded. On the other hand, it's like, man, you better figure out the offensive line in a hurry, because I think that is job number one in the spring. But job 1A is finding out who your starting quarterback is, because I think they've got two guys who are quite competent of being in that, and possibly a third. But the reason I say that about the starting quarterback is, as we all know, the starting quarterback is the leader of your football team, definitely the leader of your offense. And neither one of these guys in the primary rotation, we're thinking here, of Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, have had a chance to exude themselves as true leaders. Because how can you be considered a true leader until you're actually the guy in the huddle, they don't huddle, until you're the actual guy running the plays and everybody knowing you're the number one guy. So it's an interesting dynamic these coaches are going to have to deal with.
That's the quarterback competition, the beginning of it. It officially starts here this month in January as Ohio State season over. CJ Stroud is off to the NFL. By Ohio State standards, CJ Stroud is in the NFL already, and it's time to move on to a new quarterback. The Buckeyes are in the throes of learning who that quarterback is going to be. We'll have full coverage of that at lettermenrow.com as we move forward in this video to a huge topic. Tim, Andy, it's one of my favorite things to talk about: winter workouts. We're going to talk about them here on the offseason report presented by Buyers Auto. We're each going to give one guy that we're watching for with winter workouts. These are a crucial time. It's about a 6-week stretch. It's when the muscle gets added. It's when the agility gets formed. It's when the speed and strength program really starts to show up at Ohio State. Mickey Marotti gets to put his hands on this program and really dig in on making these guys championship ready. He's been doing it for a decade at Ohio State, maybe even longer, if my math is correct. Tim, one guy that you are really keeping an eye on this winter to see how that progression happens for Ohio State.
They would be soon to be sophomore. Do we even call them sophomores anymore? Soon to be second-year player, running back Dallin Hayden, who obviously was a late addition to the 2022 class, was not able to be an early enrollee to that class because of his school situation back in Memphis, meaning they didn't really allow that. He didn't come in until June. We saw the strides he made fast in the summer workouts, and then stepping up into the preseason workouts, and then the way he was able to step up in place, at least roster-wise, of an Evan Pryor, of the Evan Pryor, who suffered a knee injury in that preseason camp. Dallin Hayden now has had the bit in his teeth, as we saw, was leaned on heavily in a couple of 3 games, and then sort of forgotten in a couple of games. Was leaned on again a little bit in the college football playoff semifinal, one point loss to Georgia. But I'm looking for this guy. I think he's got a big upside, and I'm looking for him to make some strides, whether you'll be able to actually see it or not, because he's in a chock full room again. You'll be able to see it maybe in the spring, because you don't expect to see Travion Henderson in the spring as he recovers from that foot surgery. But I just look at Dallin Hayden. I think his fuse has been lit.
Andy?
I'm going with Jair Brown. This is a cornerback position that Ohio State needs to figure out desperately. I mean, the pass defense was a huge problem towards the end of the season. We saw it against Georgia. We saw it against Michigan. It was an Achilles heel for a defense that was supposed to be much improved. It was much improved most of the year. But, man, that secondary was gashed towards the end of the year. And cornerback is interesting because you lose Cam Brown. You lose J.K. Johnson, who transfers to LSU, which was a bit of a surprise. You've got both Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke coming off injuries. And so now you got a situation where you got a second-year guy in Jair Brown who played 10 games this past year. And really, the game that stuck out to me was against Wisconsin. He played 52 defensive snaps, only allowed 2 catches for 14 yards. I mean, I know that Wisconsin game ended up being a beatdown, but he was part of that defensive performance that really shut down that Wisconsin team. And that can't be overlooked as a guy that got a lot of experience as a first year. We know Ohio State isn't afraid to play young guys early. I actually think that his biggest competition are the 2 guys they're bringing in. They were the number 1 and number 2 prospects at the cornerback position, according to On3. And that's Calvin Simpson-Hunt and Jermaine Matthews. And Jermaine Matthews is one of the 11 mid-year enrollees coming in here for Ohio State that's already on campus. So that's someone he could be battling with in this winter workout period. But I do think that Jair Brown has a leg up, similar to we're talking about Kyle McCord, just having game experience coming in and just having something under his belt. And that's more than something in 10 games and a number of snaps he played and the coverage experience he has.
And real quick, Andy, where is Calvin Simpson Hunt from? Waxahachie, Texas. Go ahead now. I just like saying Waxahachie.
Every time we talk about him, Tim's going to have to
It's
do
a
that.
great,
That's okay.
you got to admit, that's a great
Teed
name
you
for
up.
a city. Just think if it had been Waxahachie, New York instead of New York City.
All right. Well, I won't think about that, but okay. Andy, I love that pick. I'm not kidding. I love that pick because the cornerback position at Ohio State, 0 interceptions last year. 0. None. 0. No
Zippo.
interceptions. That's not acceptable. You're Ohio State. Intercept the ball. That's got to happen more. They've got to be able to play the ball. Jair Brown is an athlete. He can play the ball well. Jermaine Matthews, Calvin Simpson Hunt. These are athletes Ohio State's bringing in. We expect Denzel Burke to be better. We expect Jordan Hancock to be healthier and have a full offseason to work. Jair Brown is going to be a key piece of that cornerback room for Tim Walton. They saw strides this year. I agree. That Wisconsin game, first career start, I thought he played well. He has to be great for Ohio State if they're going to make strides in that cornerback room. I'm going to stick on the defense. I'm going to go with Caden Curry, a defensive end. This is a guy – I don't want to sound like Chris Collingsworth again, but here's a guy who made huge strides as a freshman, underrated as a recruit. I'm willing to say it. Lettermen Row has been beating the drum as Caden Curry fans for a long time, since his junior year of high school. He was underrated coming out of Indiana. If he played in Florida, Texas, California, Georgia, he would have been a 5-star. This is a guy who's just productive. He's got the one word that everyone uses with him is motor. Where does motor show up more than anywhere? Winter workouts. If you're going to have a high motor, you're going to be a winter workout warrior. And I love the alliteration there, to be able to say that about him. But Caden Curry is a guy I've got my eye on. If you look at this defensive end depth chart, I did a depth chart projection last week for LettermenRow.com. It is thin on the defensive line at the defensive end spot. You've got JT Tuimoloau out. You've got Jack Sawyer probably sliding down to defensive end. Behind them, it's a lot of youth. It's Caden Curry. It's Kenyatta Jackson. It's Omari Abor. 3 guys who have to step up. If one of them's going to make that second-year leap that Larry Johnson always loves talking about, DeBosa's made the second-year leap. Chase Young made the second-year leap. Zach Harrison didn't have a chance to because of the COVID year. I think that really set him back. Caden Curry's not going to have that problem. This is a guy who can make a second-year leap. That starts with Mickey Marotti in the weight room, and I expect Caden Curry to take full advantage of that and be able to enter the spring even. Not even enter the training camp in the fall, but enter the spring as one to watch, as somebody who's going to be a key part of that rotation. And, hey, he's big enough. Maybe he even slides inside sometimes, and that rush man package becomes a down lineman in a 3-tech, on 3rd and long. And so I think he's versatile enough. He can do a lot, and I'm excited to see what he does this winter, putting on some weight and being able to get a little stronger for the Buckeyes.
Were you surprised that they didn't try to sprinkle him in more in games that mattered? I'm talking about on the field, on defense, not special teams where he excelled. But I was surprised they didn't try to sprinkle him in a little bit more, because there's no denying him when this guy comes off the ball, he's going to get to where he's headed eventually, if you follow my drift. And I was surprised they didn't. I don't know. I thought that was a little bit of a shortcoming defensively by the staff as the season went on. What was your take on that?
You know what, Tim? I think it's kind of interesting because you look at the 3 guys that we mentioned, and I don't think we even meant to do this. You could make an argument that Dallin Hayden should have been on the field more, definitely against Michigan, maybe even more against Georgia instead of Mayan Williams, who was obviously hobbled. You can make an argument that there were times where the guys starting weren't getting it done, and there was no reason not to go to Jair Brown to see what he could do. You could make an argument that Caden Curry should – all 3 of these guys – obviously, we didn't mean to set this up this way. All 3 of these guys, though, that we mentioned as potential breakouts here in the winter workouts could have been on the field for Ohio State, and it could have been justified pretty easily. Dallin Hayden was the healthiest running back on the roster. Jair Brown, worth a shot because you weren't getting hands on the ball from your starting cornerbacks, and some of them weren't even healthy all year. One of them had a broken hand for a while. And then Caden Curry, a guy who, if you're going to have a guy out there whose ceiling you're not sure of, is it going to be Javonte Jean-Baptiste or should it be Caden Curry? There's an argument to be made for the freshman. And so I think that it is an interesting talking point for you. Andy, do you agree that maybe these guys, all 3, could have been on the field in November and December, and now in January they get to show why, and they can move that into March and into August?
Certainly, and I think Where you'd maybe see them most was the bowl game against Georgia because you had a full month to prepare there. I get that it's a little bit tough mid-season as you're going towards the stretch of the end of the regular season. We saw Caden Curry's best game, I thought, against Iowa. Yeah. And then after that point, I would have expected to see him play more, kind of to Tim's point. And, as you mentioned, Spencer, all of these guys really could have played more throughout the end of the regular season and into the bowl game. But I think with the defensive end position, it was a little bit tricky because that defensive line rotation already as complicated as it is, and finding snaps for guys like JT Tuimoloau, guys like Zach Harrison, guys like Jack Sawyer, there's a lot of mouths to feed. I think Caden Curry's mouth should have been fed along with the ones I just mentioned, but it is a little bit trickier. And maybe it is. You mentioned Javonte Jean-Baptiste got some snaps in the bowl game. He did have half a sack, so it's not like he didn't produce. But I just think that it was a little bit tricky to find a way to get all of those guys snaps. Yeah,
and with Ryan Day possibly stepping back, keep using that term. That's incorrect. Stepping up and over and becoming maybe the classic head coach. I'm just wondering if they're going to address there's nothing you can do about what happened in 2022 now in terms of why you did or didn't play guys, but you can address it going forward, especially with young guys in these classes who show the potential and then they can really help you, in the postseason, which I call starting with the Michigan game is the postseason anymore. They can really help you when it really matters. The young pups, as John Cooper used to call them. I think it was a shortcoming that they can address now and maybe fix headed forward. But yeah, I would love to have seen Caden Curry play more in critical moments than he did, especially down the stretch. And it'll be interesting to see if the coaches address those kind of issues headed forward.
Tim, there's only one more year where this is even going to be acceptable, that you cannot play these freshmen, because starting in 2024, if you want to win a national championship, you have to beat 4 elite teams to win a national championship. There's a 12-team playoff coming. You're going to need to expand that rotation. Make sure that your freshmen are ready to go, because in January, the odds of you needing them in December and January go up because you add more games, you add more potential injury, you add more practice time for these guys. So this is the last year where you might even see a situation where we're questioning why they didn't play the young guys. They're going to have to play them starting in 2024. That doesn't apply for Caden Curry. He'll be a junior by then. Jair Brown the same way, Dallin Hayden the same way. But you're seeing a shift in college football, and I think Ohio State probably could have deployed that a couple years early and played all 3 of these guys. But those are 3 names we're just watching. That doesn't mean they're the only 3. I have another 3 on lettermenrow.com. It includes tight end Joe Royer. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him. Expecting huge things out of Joe this offseason into spring camp. Ohio State even posted a picture of him online. He looked like he's already added some weight. So those are.
Wait a minute, are we each going to get to name another guy?
No, right now. We've got plenty of offseason video content here at the offseason report at lettermenrow.com, presented by Buyers Auto. That's the 40-year vet, Tim May. That's Andy Backstrom. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching, folks. Thanks for listening. We will see you guys back at Lettermen Row YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe below. Come check us out at the Letterman Lounge. It's $30 until August. That is a lot of coverage for a little money. Tim, Andy, if I do say so myself. Again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys back here next time. The offseason report presented by Buyers Auto.